Hello, welcome to Reconnect Day 3, Return to Self. Today is about the return. Okay, I'm going to give everybody a few minutes to hop in. I think we should start this one off differently. If you've been doing the work, if you've been showing up for day 1 and 2, how are you feeling? Let me know how you are feeling as you contemplate the awareness, as you start to look at the body, mind, and soul rituals. How are you feeling? Are you showing up and starting to do the work? Are you learning different forms of awareness? Are you getting more caught up in your head and recognizing that, hey, I am starting to be aware of what's making me disconnected? I'd love to know, how are you feeling since knowing these particular tools and starting to peel back the layers of awareness and move more away from disconnection? I would love to know. Finally, I also want to mention that this is our final day in the series. So we're really going to try to bring it full circle today. We're going to do a bit of a recap. And then I want to discuss why this is so beneficial to your well-being, to your mental health, to your emotional healing journey, and most of all, if you're spiritually awakening, how it can benefit you as you're awakening. So we're going to dive into that in a minute. So I want to give everybody a few minutes to head in. I'm going to be honest with you. Today was full of resistance. And I think it's an interesting way where we can start to realize that I am not perfect. And I think when we talk about these things, we can easily just gloss over, yeah, it's easy to just show up every day, but actually it's not. A lot of the times there is resistance. So I've been doing a 5-day workout, and I think this is like kind of relevant because we're talking about challenges a lot today. So it's a good segue into what we're talking about. And I've been starting a new workout, and it's been a ton of fun. But now we're on week 3. I'm in that PMS phase. My hormones are shifting. Everything's shifting. And I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. So the resistance that came up this morning was huge to showing up. And because I have the right tools, when I know that I have certain roadblocks start to show up, I easily was like, okay, we're just going to do the dang thing, because I know when to listen to my body and actually rest. And I also know when I'm just fooling around with myself and just making excuses. And today was just whiny, cranky excuses, not choosing to get the work done. And as someone who teaches mindset and mind body, it's easy to start to create a slippery slope for yourself where you lose not just lack of momentum, but you start to kid yourself and make excuses as to why you can't just commit and show up. And so a big piece of the Mind Body Ritual Challenge is we cover an entire week of how to overcome mental and emotional roadblocks, because they will happen. They happen to me, they'll happen to you, they happen to everyone. But it's more about recognizing how quick is your comeback rate. You know, inconsistency can happen. Recognizing that consistency doesn't mean 7 days a week, 9 times out of 10. A lot of the times it's about how much are you choosing to show up? How much can your body handle showing up? And most importantly, it's also about recognizing that not everybody's body is the same, and that's okay. Understand where you're at in the given season that you are. You know, if I were to say the same thing when I had a toddler at my hip and, I was nursing a newborn, I would be giving you totally different answers than saying do 5 days of workout and mindset work. But that's not where we're at. So it's interesting how respect the season you're in, respect your personal boundaries and with your body. And when we go into this type of work, I think it's so much better to have discernment with yourself and asking yourself those questions like, does my body actually feel like it wants to commit and do this workout? Or am I just making excuses? Because there's a big differentiation, right? Okay, so we got a few minutes to hop in. I personally just left the link for the challenge already, just to be transparent with you, because this entire series has been a lead up to showing you the power of mind body rituals. And the body ritual challenge is the next step if you wish to take this further. Now, what I do want to talk about today is most importantly, why all of this is so beneficial to our personal well being and how it can really create a lot of transformation for you when you commit and show up. And that's what the challenge aspect is truly about, because there are roadblocks. There are moments of mental and emotional roadblocks that we will face. You know, I'm a procrastinator. I know when I can call myself out on my own shit. Like, I know what are the little hacks and the little triggers that make me procrastinate. And I also know how to get out of that because I've learned. And at the same time, it's the same concept with dysregulation and starting to bring in that awareness piece, right? So let's go over a little bit into the journey, right? So if you've been here watching day 1 and day 2, congratulations for bringing in so much radical awareness to your spiritual growth journey, because we have been doing a lot of deep work in regard to how we can get ourselves out of disconnection and start to properly reconnect back to ourselves. And because of that, bravo, bravo. If you're showing up doing the soul work, awesome. Because this is really powerful for your nervous system, for your mental and emotional health, and your physical health at that. Because when we start to learn that we don't have to be in a space of reactive habit, we can start to make better choices for ourselves. And that's really what it's about. So acknowledge the journey that you've been on, most of all. And also think back to where we started. Where we started was looking at disconnection. Why does it happen? What is going on? And we learned a lot about dysregulation and why dysregulation happens, and it keeps us in survival. And then we also learned a lot about how we can start to get out of that with awareness. And awareness is one of those beautiful catalysts to pure transformation because it induces inductive reasoning, which means we have the power now to accept or reject the information. And what happens with that? Well, we get to realize that we can choose to make a different choice instead of reactively being emotionally triggered by something. That's a huge shift in awareness compared to just allowing yourself to get stuck down the rabbit hole of overthinking, overanalyzing, overdoing, and getting stuck in that survivalistic brain, right? So I invite you to think about this as a whole. How are you feeling now? Now that you have this awareness piece starting to come online, and you're also starting to be aware that actually I need to be tapping in fully to how does my body feel? How does my soul feel? What is going on beneath the surface? Because we don't ask ourselves these deeper questions. And that's what we really explored heavily in day 2. Day 2 was packed with tons of information. If you did not watch day 2, I highly recommend watching day 2 because day 3 will make a lot more sense this way. And then we also discovered a lot in regard to the 3 pillars. And the 3 pillars are very paramount to what we're going to discuss today, because we're going to take it one step further into what occurs and what happens once we start to do this deeper level work. Because at the end of the day, when you start to work on the mind, when you start to work on the body, and then you also start to work on your intuition, something magical happens with the mind-body connection that is very, very powerful, but often underutilized in the spiritual industry space because we're only working with one or the other. We're choosing to do that regulation work, and we're just regulating and being aware, or we're just doing the mindset work, which is very common in the manifestation spaces, and a lot of just doing meditation, for example. So then we just get stuck in the mind, and then we realize that we have to ground out all that energy. And then we have the other conversation, which is the intuition space, and recognizing that as we strengthen our intuition, we can start to hone in more on our natural clair abilities. We can start to hone in more on what naturally helps us tap in and tune on to our personal intuition. And that could be something wildly different than what the latest guru is telling you to do, because you're not naturally connected to who you are and how your intuition actually operates. And that's the differentiation. And recognizing that is how we start to change the channel here, right? So we started to learn about those 3 pillars, understanding that when we work on the body, we're working on regulation. When we work on the soul, we're working with our intuition and developing a solid relationship to higher self. And then we learned that when we start to work on mindset and the mind, we start to have a focused, intentional direction of how we choose to move forward in life. And we start to shift beliefs, we start to shift thoughts, we start to shift negative thinking patterns, and so forth. So, because of those 3 pillars that are going on, what is happening below the surface is we are showing up regulated. We're strengthening our intuition and our intuitive gifts. And most importantly, we're also changing the direction of our focus. And that is incredibly powerful. So, do you guys have any questions at all? Because when it comes to doing this work, I know we've covered a lot so far. So I wanted to kind of leave a giant space open. If you have questions today, please drop them in the chat box. And do not hesitate to reach out if you have a personal question. I feel like this is all weird today. Okay. Oh, I did want to mention before we dive into the lesson this week, or today, is the video was kind of funky yesterday. I don't know. There's been storms happening, so I don't know if that was going on or not. Hopefully the video is better today, but I decided, hey, this is a great opportunity to add everything to the podcast. So we're going to be stripping all the audios and adding everything to the podcast. Day 1 is officially up. If you prefer to re-listen, or if you are more of an audio person, that's cool. That is available for you. And I will be having all of them as soon as they're available, probably by Saturday. I notice it takes like an entire 24 hours to render for some reason. That's a YouTube problem, not a me problem. So that will be available for you as well. I am not immediately taking these videos down. I want the people who needs to hear this work to hear this work. So it will be up there for you on the podcast and the YouTube. And most importantly, let's start to dive into the lesson, right? Okay. So if you have questions, drop them below. We will get them at the end. And if you, I don't remember what the last thought was. It was about if you wanted to answer the question of what are you feeling, I would love to hear from you. So recognizing the power of all this soul work. How are you feeling now, currently in your body? What are the sensations that are coming up for you, and so forth? Okay, so now that we have our recap and we're starting to recognize some of those roadblocks, right? We have procrastination, inconsistency, self-doubt, getting caught up in our heads to the point of inaction. That's a really common one. Recognizing that you know exactly what you want to do, but you don't have the power to do it, or you just can't will yourself to do it. That's often a lot of dysregulation going on. And so we're learning that a lot of these roadblocks are often created because of dysregulation. So it's because of that disconnection piece. That is the reason why we have a hard time showing up. And then the other piece of why we have a hard time showing up is exactly as I mentioned before. It does not resonate with our natural intuition. One of the hugest reasons why we don't show up to our spiritual practice is because it's going against our natural blueprint. And when I say blueprint, I mean like the way that your intuition operates, the way that you naturally learn, the way that you naturally show up. And are you making it easy and rational to show up? Because that's a huge one too, right? So when we talk about playing in this game of consistency, right? I feel like it's such like a stigma happening where it's like, you've got to be consistent or else. And what if consistency isn't actually the real problem? It's actually creating an environment so that it's easy to show up. Because if you realize that a big missing piece to just showing up is not motivation, it's actually creating the right environment for you. It's like a totally different conversation, because inconsistency is often rooted in being unrealistic with yourself. It's saying, I can show up for 7 days a week and meditate 20 to 30 minutes, or no, they'll even say an hour. I can meditate for an hour 7 days a week. And all of us have lives. Okay. I have kids. I have a man. I have this business. I have a life outside of this. Like, I cannot devote like an entire hour to meditation. I mean, I could if I really wanted to, but for most of us, we need real tools in real time that work for our natural benefit, and we can fit it into our life and not have a 2-hour morning routine or morning ritual that we think is just a fucking fantasy. But in reality, we just have to get real with what season we're in, right? So I think that's a huge piece to the puzzle that is often overlooked when it comes to consistency. And so, talk about a mental roadblock to play with. I invite you to look at, where am I making it absolutely harder than necessary to just show up? Because let me tell you, that question alone can shed a ton of light for you in recognizing, okay, maybe I'm being unrealistic with myself. Maybe this bullet point list of things I'm supposed to do actually isn't even necessary. And it's more necessary to recognize, how do I connect to my intuition? For example, so when it comes to looking at these 3 pillars and moving away from the roadblocks, right? So we have this concept of roadblocks. So we have procrastination, self-doubt, inconsistency, getting caught up in your head, refusing to take action. Like, we have all of these different roadblocks that are going on. But on the other spectrum, when we do start to show up and commit, and now we have the tools to overcome those mental roadblocks, well, what occurs is you start to build a muscle of natural consistency through safety. And the way I look at this is, you have to recognize that when you choose to show up, you're teaching your subconscious that it's safe and this is normal and that this is a part of your natural life, right? So, for example, when you first learn to like drive a car, right? It's scary. It's like, you don't know what's going to happen. It's a constant mystery. Like, for most of us, driving a car was terrifying in the beginning because we didn't know what the heck we were doing. And we were just kind of like figuring it out as we go. Well, when you start a new practice, it is the same thing, because you are developing it into a skill, a habit. You're developing you're literally developing it as a compound effect. And that compound effect is what's going to build a natural level of consistency that produces into your identity. So, for example, just think about any habit that you have in life, right? So, brushing your teeth, for example. I brush my teeth twice a day, in the morning and right before bed. At this point, it's so automatic that if I am exhausted and falling asleep on my partner's, chest, I will still get up and brush my teeth, because it's automatic and it's so simple that I don't think about it. It's become ingrained in my identity, right? I invite you to think about, what's something that's completely ingrained in your identity already. That's just a normal habit of yours, okay? It could be anything. Now, that is what you need to do for your practice. And that's how consistency sticks. Consistency will stick the moment that you override the resistance so much to the point where it's automatic and trained in your identity. For example, I know 7 days out of the week, I will write. It's taken a few years to do that, but I know for a fact that every day I show up and have a writing practice. 9 times out of 10, unless life happens, there's a soccer game and I get winded and life happens, most of the time I am showing up and writing because that's a core part of my personal identity. Is everybody like that? No, of course not. But for a fact, it is ingrained in my identity. It has been since I've been 15. Not that I was showing up and doing a daily writing practice, but it's a natural part of my intuitive gift. And it is easy for me to show up. That's the difference of consistency and habit when you ingrain it in your identity. And so when we talk about these 3 pillars, I invite you to explore the concept of if you start to show up for a body practice or a mindset practice or a soul practice, what do you think's going to happen when you start to ingrain this into your personal identity? Because that's the work that we do in the Mind Body Ritual Challenge, is we take it all the way to the identity level so that you recognize what comes easy for you. And that's the difference between someone saying meditate for 30 days or do a writing practice for 30 days or, even work out for 30 days. The reason why we fall off, we don't stay committed, is because we haven't ingrained it in the identity. And so that's a big core piece of what I teach inside of the Mind Body Ritual Challenge. But when we look at these 3 pillars, right, we have to look at it from a way of, okay, if I choose to show up 30, 60, 90 days, right? 30, 60, 90 is often a representation of pure transformation because it takes 28 days or more to create an actual habit. If you can't commit for at least 30 days, it's not a habit. You're still dabbling. And that's actually really important to know because when you say, oh, I'm just setting myself up for failure and it's been 2 weeks, yeah, you haven't actually stuck through long enough to develop everything into a habit yet. So you're still playing the game with yourself. And it's important to recognize that because if you are kind of a person who's like, I'm going to commit, I'm going to do it. And then you have like a million excuses show up. You're flip-flopping all over the place. You're inconsistent. You're dabbling. That's going to happen until you ingrain it into a habit. That is just the truth. The people who are like, man, they're so lucky. They show up all the time. How do they do it? I don't have that kind of willpower. They made it into a habit. That's the secret. That is the secret. So when we look at, if I did 30 days of a body practice, helping myself regulate and helping myself be embodied, showing up, exercising, showing up with mindful movement, showing up, regulating my body, what do you think is going to happen? What is going to happen is you're going to start to feel more regulated in your body versus dysregulated. And we talked a little bit about this in day 2, but I want to bring it in even further today to recognize, okay, well, what the heck what is that going to look like? Well, when you show up more regulated, you are present and feeling safe in your body. You are less anxious. You are more likely to think through on your decisions instead of react to your decisions. You are more likely to be embodied in who you are and your authentic self. And you may notice that suddenly your decision-making skills are so much cleaner and clearer because your intuition is fully activated and turned on. You have a higher intelligence. You are not just operating from a survivalistic concept. And so what is happening behind the scenes when you show up and regulate, it's not just, hey, I feel safe, I feel great, I feel peaceful. It's you're going to make better decisions. You're going to be smarter. You're going to be more intelligent. You're going to have better decision-making skills as a whole, as a concept. You're going to have better clarity and mental clarity. You're going to feel in tune with your body and what is coming up with your body. Like, hey, I'm feeling kind of like gross and tired today. Maybe I should rest. That is different than the person's like, I'm going to push myself, I'm going to overdo it, I'm going to push myself to the max, and then you burn out, right? That's coming from survival. So this concept of if you chose to do 30 days of a practice and started to regulate, how would your life start to change? I invite you to play with that and look at that, because you'll notice that when you show up and actually regulate your body for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, all of that dysregulation, the disconnection gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Now, I want to preface this and say, if you have trauma or if it's hard to be in your body, this might take a little bit more time. It might take a little bit more work. And, I'm not a miracle worker here. Like, we all have different stories. We all have different trauma. We all have small trauma, big trauma, and so forth. That isn't to say that it can't also be possible for you, but it is to say that sometimes we might have to do deeper somatic work when it comes to looking at those pieces. But at the same time, if you were to just imagine for me a minute here and thinking about, well, when I choose to be regulated in my body and I show up and do those body rituals, how will my life shift and change? I'm going to be active. I'm going to be more responsive and less reactive. I'm going to have a higher intelligence. I'm going to move and flow with more action in my life. And I will also know when it's right to slow down. How cool is that, to recognize that when you get out of that mentality of survival, you open up that abundance channel in a way where it's not even just, about money here. We're talking about full on receiving of self. And that's a different conversation entirely, because now we're talking about letting in ideas, letting in intelligence, getting the cosmic downloads from intuition, and so forth. So that's all capable, fully possible for you when you play with regulation for over 30 to 60 to 90 days. Now, that's the first pillar. When we look at regulation, right? We're moving away from disconnection to regulation. And that is mostly possible when we do the body rituals. And as we learned yesterday, you cannot, when your body is dysregulated, the mindset rituals are completely useless to you. And that's the differentiation that's happening in the spiritual community, is we have all of this accountability and practice towards doing the mindset work, and we're neglecting the entire body piece. But look at what happens when you do show up and do the body piece. It's incredible, right? So I invite you to play with that. Now, to look at this next pillar, the mindset pillar, I want you to also consider here how a lot of people are not fully tapped into their mindset. When I started learning about mindset, one of the most pivotal things that I learned was about intention setting and recognizing that I could start my day being like, I choose this. I choose to feel more happy. And what happens is, okay, sure, it's a thought, right? And it would be as simple as just writing down my intentional goals and feelings for the day. But what you'll notice as you start to do this over 30, 60, 90 days, you suddenly are happier. You suddenly are more peaceful. You suddenly are pulled in the right direction. I mean, I know a really random one I remember is I was struggling a lot with systems in my business. And I started writing, I am always focused on doing more effective systems in my business that are easy and help bring more spaciousness into my life, or something I said. And at first, nothing really happened. But then I started to think, and then I started to notice things, and then I started to attract things. And then I started to realize, hey, I should contact this coach about how she does these systems and da 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 da. And what you'll notice, and this is the point I'm diving in, is it changes your focus. And so what happens really powerfully with mindset work that a lot of people are just not saying enough is it's shifting your reticular activating system in your body. So that is how you hone your focus. So your reticular activating system is literally what you're observing and attracting. So for example, if I say, think about the color red, and your eyes immediately dash to whatever's red in the room, that is your reticular activating system working. So it's really fun to do with cars because you can do it really easily. And it's like kind of hilarious when you start to do it with cars because it'd be like entertaining yourself as you're like waiting in the parking lot for something, as that often happens with children. So I invite you to play with that to understand how your RAS works. But what's happening is behind the scenes, you're focusing and you're training your focus every time you show up for a mindset practice. So I think it's really powerful when you combine meditation and journaling together because not only are you clear, but you're learning how to connect those two pieces of what I'm receiving in meditation. I'm going to write down and then I'm going to set those intentions. So it's kind of like a pure channel to intuition. So if you're more connected to that automatic writing, I highly recommend trying that, especially if you feel like you need to get better at it because it will help a ton. And that's a little bit of a segue, but it's actually an important one because if you have like the monkey chatter going on, I highly, highly, highly recommend meditate and then write. It will be a million times different when you allow yourself to do the long, deep breathing and get into the pranayama and then start to journal all the information that you receive from the meditation. Completely different situation. But in general, when you show up and do 30 days of mindset work, you're honing your focus to go where it wants to go. You're starting to train your body and your mind to work in synergy. And then what happens from that is then you start to change your actions. You're starting to change the trajectory that you're telling yourself, right? Because now we have not just the mindset piece going on, we also have the body piece going on, right? So it's one thing to do the mindset work, but it's more powerful to recognize the mindset work alongside of the regulation work. And then those two together, it's really powerful because now you're going to take the action. Now you're going to show up. Now the intuition's on board. And I think there's a huge problem when you hear inspired action, but your intuition is not on board. So in the manifestation space, when we say get into inspired action, yeah, with your intuition not on board, you're just guessing. You're just guessing from the ego. Hey, I think this might be a good idea. I'm going to try the 10 things that will help me. That is not inspired action. Intuitive led action is literally driven by your intuition. And it will feel like a first response hit coming in your body, and it will be automatic. It will not be writing down a list. Kind of one of my soapbox moments from the manifestation world. But recognizing that when you start to do that focus work, you're going to start changing what you're attracting. And as I like to say, when you start to change the inner world, the outer world will inevitably shift. Because when you start to work on the inner world, when you start to work on your mindset, your body, your intuition, you're changing from the inside out. And then you're going to slowly start changing what you're attracting. And that's the power of the mindset work. And if you were to show up for 30, 60, 90 days of mindset work, that is what happens. Because what is so crucial about mindset, and this is the funny part, is recognizing when you regulate and do mindset work, you're teaching your body that it is safe to have the thing. So, in manifestation world, we have like all of these intention settings. Sorry, my knee's itching. It's kind of annoying. Manifestation world has all of these intention setting things. And a lot of it is just rooted in writing affirmations, right? But what I've learned is the affirmations are fuel to take action. So if that isn't happening, then that's the disconnect. So that's the real disconnect going on. And when you start to realize that when you set those intentions, you're saying, hey, I'm moving forward in this way. Hey, I'm going to take action in this way. Hey, I'm moving forward in that way. That is different than someone's like, I am a millionaire. I am love. And so forth. It's empty, right? It feels like a lie. It feels, it just doesn't feel good because it's not actually connected to your body. It's not connected to who you are. And when that happens, I mean, let's be real. It doesn't feel good. It just doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to take action. It doesn't feel good because it feels like a lie and we're trying to trick the subconscious. So doing it more from an embodied way, that's when we start to really hone in on how we can shift and change our focus. And that's the main point I'm driving in is so when you start to do that for 30, 60, 90 days, what's going to happen, right? So I invite you to think about that. If you did 30 days of mindset work and where you start to work on your focus consistently, what would happen, right? And then finally, my favorite piece is intuition, right? So we've got our 3 pillars. So we work on the body, the mind, and now we're going to talk about the soul, right? So soul practices. So soul practices, we're talking about channeling to higher self, connecting to higher consciousness within yourself, working on strengthening your intuitive gifts by focusing more on their particular, I want to say it's almost like vehicle, the vessel. So for example, mine's writing. So writing is the vessel. Or if it's automatic speaking, maybe you record a lot. That's a good one. Another one could be more hands-on, like you have to do yoga, or as if you're a kinesthetic learner, for example, maybe you need to like have fidgets or something, and that's going to help you connect to your intuition. And another thing that you can also think about in regard to intuitive gifts is recognizing that if you have a different gift from, say, what you're actually doing in your spiritual practice, then you start to shift and change your spiritual practice to incorporate your gift versus just focusing on rigid ideas, right? What we're often told. And then you start to realize I'm strengthening my natural ability. That's a powerful thing. And that is just really, really beautiful in so many ways because you recognize that you're strengthening your natural born gift that lives inside of you. Maybe it's been dormant. Maybe you've been suppressing it. Maybe it's been suppressed because of dysregulation. And then you start to show up 30, 60, 90 days and start to strengthen that muscle. What's going to happen? Your intuition is going to be so much more powerful. It's going to be easier to have clarity. You're not going to be all over the place. You're not going to be doubting yourself left, right, and center. You're not going to be stuck in all the limited beliefs. You're not even going to be stuck second guessing yourself as much because what's going to happen is your intuition's going to take over. And that's the difference. That's the difference. It's like I always like to say, and there's nothing against cards. I love cards. But it's the difference between someone who wakes up and relies on oracle cards versus someone who just immediately knows with their inner knowing what they need to do and they don't need to consult external sources. That is the difference from moving and graduating away from like, and I'm not going to be mean here, but I'm going to say the kindergarten version of intuition versus the college version of intuition. And there is a difference because someone who is like, oh, I kind of think I know what I'm talking about. Let's ask the cards versus someone who is tapped in and tuned on to, yes, I should do this. Yes, I know that I need to break up with him. Yes, I know I need to do this. You know, we have a certainty in our bodies that the person that is still just playing with cards and looking for external sources is not there. And there is a difference. And it is a skill. It's a skill and a development. So do not discredit yourself. And I'm not saying that cards are bad. I love cards. I do cards all the time. But it is a difference of certainty because the person who's probably in that space is still second guessing, still doubting, still losing trust with themselves. And maybe they never had that trust. You know, I grew up with my mom always trying to make decisions for me all the time. So I had to literally self-teach myself, great English, how to make decisions. Isn't that crazy? Because that was part of my programming. So I had to literally reprogram that concept because it taught me to not trust my intuition. And because of that, I had to redevelop that self trust. And, it's the same concept of when a lot of people have a lot of limited beliefs going on and they think that it's all about fixing themselves and really, dissecting themselves, trying to figure out what's wrong. This is really common in the manifestation space, but it's starting to sneak into, the spiritual awakening space, is what I've noticed from just watching over the years. And when that happens, what's going on is we have too much distrust. There's too much distrust. There's too much doubt. There's too much second guessing. And that's all coming from disconnection. And so when you start to recognize, hey, I can choose to start to strengthen my intuition by showing up to a soul practice, a spiritual practice, 30, 60, 90 days, what is going to happen in my life and in my body and with my intuition? Well, I know for a fact from given experience that I'm going to start to develop a stronger relationship to my higher self and my intuition. I'm going to start to develop my intuition better so that I'm not getting stuck really in second guessing myself and kind of almost in that anxious paranoia. Is this right? I don't know. That kind of space where you're kind of second guessing, but questioning yourself. So that's the word I'm looking for. You're questioning yourself constantly because there's no trust. So the fastest way to develop intuition is trust in yourself. It's self-trust. Self-trust is the fastest way to develop your intuition. And if you don't have that, if you're suppressing it, if because of your past, it's been hard, or you had a weird situation where, like me, where someone else was making decisions for you and you never were even given the opportunity, then that's where it really starts. That's the work. That's the work of actually, I need to trust that I'm making the right decision. A really good affirmation is I always make the right decision that's meant for me. That's a really good affirmation if you're working on building trust. Because when you say, I choose to trust my inner guidance, you're telling yourself and your body that it's safe to start to trust yourself, right? We talked about the focusing. So this is where we start the priming, right? And then when you start to bring in the soul element of, I'm going to work on this gift, I'm going to work on it consistently, I'm going to show up at least 3 to 5 days a week, starting to work on growing my muscle of intuition, that's different. Because now you're going to show up with more clarity, more focus, and most importantly, better decisions. And most importantly, you will walk away starting to trust yourself deeper. And when you start to do that level of work, this is the work that will help you start to move more into soul purpose work, into emotional healing. If you need healing, it will help you manifest easier and so forth. Because not only are we changing the conversation that we're telling with ourselves in our bodies, but we're starting to project different energy, right? We're starting to recreate that mind-body connection piece. And that's where literally everything starts to shift and change, right? Because we're regulated, we're strengthening, we're working on focused intention. Those three pieces together change the way we're taking action and showing up. We're more intelligent. We're honed in on our gifts. We're starting to move and flow with aligned action. And all of those things start to snowball the more we show up and do them. And that's why a challenge is the perfect vehicle for exactly that. And that's what we do inside of the Mind Body Ritual Challenge. Okay. So that is why I created the Mind Body Ritual Challenge, is because these are the components that are often overlooked in the spiritual space. We're not asking ourselves these deeper questions, and we're not consistently showing up for them. And instead, what happens is we're getting stuck in the anxiety, in the overwhelm, in the I want to show up, but I don't know what to do, or I want to show up, and I know what I want to do, but I can't make myself show up. All of these inner fears that are happening is because you need to ingrain it into a habit. And that is what the Mind Body Ritual Challenge truly helps you do, is it keeps you accountable, it keeps you consistent, and it helps you defeat the mental roadblocks. And that's at the core of what the Mind Body Ritual Challenge does. Okay, so have you any questions so far? Because now we can start to see the full picture, right? What does it mean to return to self? What does that look like in our bodies? How can we recognize that as we choose to show up 30, 60, 90 days, now we are changing our nervous system. We are rewiring the story we're telling, right? And then at the same time, we recognize that there's a piece beyond awareness, right? One thing to just be aware and regulate. It's highly another to recognize that this repatterning process is starting to happen, where we're allowing ourselves to regulate consistency, to show up consistently, to wake up that dormant intuitive energy going on in the body. And at the same time, we're connecting the mind-body connection. So, all right. That is most of what I wanted to tell you. And I want to introduce you to the Mind Body Ritual Challenge. Have you any questions so far? Okay. All right. What I want to do here is to just break it down for you, what is really happening. So right now, I am super excited to announce that I will be opening awakening sessions. This is something new I am doing to help you. If there is a particular area you need focused on in regard to spiritual awakening, emotional healing, mind-body healing, and so forth, you can book a one-on-one session with me to take this work even deeper and help you heal, transform, whatever we need to work on, we do it together. At the same time, I am also releasing an accountability challenge inside of the Mighty Networks group, the Awakened Network. And this is going to be an accountability challenge to help you create what we just talked about, to recognize the regulating, the strengthening intuition, to recognize how to hone your focus better so that you get where you're going, and then defeat those roadblocks along the way. Because that's what it means to be in the mind-body connection, right? So when we move away from disconnection, we start to recognize, hey, I don't have to live with this much anxiety in the background of my life. I don't have to keep stopping and starting and stopping and starting. I can choose to create an easy ritual that helps me want to show up and show up consistently. And then the irony, and this has happened to me, is recognizing that the days I don't show up, I feel like crap. And I recognize that, hey, I actually should show up. And you recognize that it starts to change, right? You start to realize that actually showing up benefits me more than not showing up. And then you start to realize that the excuses are just bullshit in your head. And the more you start to show up for your mindset, for your soul, for your body. And then at the same time, you might be also in this conversation with yourself of, well, maybe today I don't need mindset work. Maybe today I just need to focus on the body. Or maybe today I just need to meditate. And that's okay. That's also great, because now you're teaching yourself what you need. You're telling your system exactly what you need. And so that's what we do in the Mind Body Ritual Challenge, is we start to break it down. So you get 30 days together, bite-sized lessons. They're usually about 15 to 20 minutes for the lesson. And then there's an action step. And this year we're going to be adding some really fun things, such as accountability and weekly shares to help you stay consistent. And then on the other spectrum, we're going to be adding some supplemental material so you can start to develop practices such as regulation techniques, connecting to your intuition, and so forth. So those are some new things that are going to be added for this new round. And previous alumni, you will also receive those too. And most importantly, when it comes to looking at the Mind Body Ritual Challenge, we're looking at daily accountability, consistency, developing community. We're also looking at how you can stay accountable and not just be alone on the journey, to start to hone in more on how you can start to show up better with a sense of community, accountability, and so forth. Because don't we want to feel more regulated? We want to work on our intuition and feel more present in our body. We want to feel empowered from the inside out. And that is what the Mind Body Ritual actually creates, is the sensation of recognizing I can choose to be embodied. I can take the action I need to take. I can work on honing in on my intuition. And then you might find yourself recognizing, you're stepping more into soul purpose work. You're stepping more into emotionally healing yourself. You show up recognizing I feel good today. I feel better in my body than I have in weeks. I'm less anxious. I'm less stressed out. I'm less fearing the future. I have less uncertainty in my body. And that's because you chose to show up. You chose to show up and commit to your soul, commit to the mind-body connection. And that's what we're doing inside of the challenge. Okay, so there is the sessions and the challenge going live today. If you have any questions at all regarding sessions and you wish to create a session together, reach out at support@theawakenedstate.net and I will give you more information about sessions. In regard to the challenge, there is a live link in the chat. I will add another one in the comments just in case you are immediately interested in learning more. And most importantly, if you have any questions about these 3 days together, what you have learned, what you're ready to step into, do not hesitate to reach out either by dropping a comment or reaching out to me personally at support@theawakenedstate.net. I am more than happy to help you and redirect you or give you advice. That is what I am here to do. Finally, I want to close this off with congratulating you for showing up, for committing to this journey, and also to give you a little bit of a taste of soul work. I invite you to play with this concept of how can you get started? How can you get started right now? And to look at what would it look like? What would it look like to paint the picture? Paint the picture in your head of what would it be like to do body rituals for 30 days? What would it be like to do soul rituals for 30 days? What would you want to change? What would you want to shift? Because if you're struggling with your intuition, you need to work on your soul rituals. If you're struggling with dysregulation, you need to start working on body rituals. If you are struggling with your mindset and the negative self-talk and having that overstimulated sensation of overthinking, overanalyzing, and getting caught up in your head, you need to start working on honing your focus. And that can only be entered with mindset rituals. And if you need deeper support with that, then I welcome you inside the Mind Body Ritual Challenge. I am really excited for what we're going to do because it's going to be in our new community space, Mighty Networks. You can also join the community for free. It was mentioned in our email. If you are a part of the email list, it was inside of there. So you can join the community for free. The challenge is a paid community space. So there's different spaces in the community. There's a free space for spiritual awakening people, and then there's the paid spaces for the courses and the membership and so forth. So inside what is that each lesson is broken down really simple. So I know you have a life outside of, all of this. So I try to keep it easy for you. I don't always encourage hour-long to hour-and-a-half-long videos because I know you have a life. I have a life. So I create my courses in terms of micro learning. So they're usually about 15 to 20 minutes. So you show up for 15 to 20 minutes, you do your work, you do your ritual. I give you tools and coaching to help you get better at it. We discuss roadblocks. We discuss different ways to make it easier for yourself. We start breaking it down how you want to do a practice, how you would like to do a practice in terms of mind, body, soul. And we also dive into some of the new supplemental material, which will help you learn how to regulate easier, which will help you how to increase your intuition easier, and so forth. And also, I think we are almost there. We are almost done. There was one more thing I wanted to add. I wanted to talk about structure, because structure is a valuable part of consistency. So when we recognize that we have 30 days of lessons and 30 days of accountability together, I'm giving you the structure for success that will help you commit, stay accountable to yourself, and start to see results. Start to see yourself more regulated. Start to see yourself strengthening your intuition. Start to see yourself honing your focus like a laser beam. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about to me. That is what it's about to me. I want you to succeed. I will try to create the environment for you to succeed. And in order to do that, the environment and structure of creating a challenge helps you stay consistent, helps you build it a momentum and build it up, right? Because we're choosing to commit to the challenge. We're choosing to do the reps. We're choosing to make it almost like a workout, right? And so because of that, not only does it have the structure to stay accountable, but it has the ability to help you succeed. And that's what it's really about to me. Okay. Do you have any questions at all? I think we are about finished. We went a little bit over than I wanted to, but that's okay. If you have any questions at all about sessions or the Mind Body Ritual Challenge, I would love to hear from you. So reach me out at support@theawakenedstate.net or drop a comment. And most importantly, the universe is inside of you and you hold the power to design your life. Bye.